appearances at PMQs. She's not exactly backwards in coming forwards and would be quite prepared to answer any question that you may have about anything. I'm glancing at my screen. I'm thinking we probably won't take the question about car parks in High Wycombe. I don't know if it's a particular expertise of yours.
It's not, but I do know that car parks and parking is one of the most contentious issues up and down the UK, if I'm honest.
Not on this show, mate. Not on this show. But I mean, anything within reason that falls in her brief as Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, you will be put straight through to her. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. So while you get your skates on and get your calls and your questions ready, I've got a couple that I will put to you, Angela. We should begin with the front page of the Times today. Speaking lessons for all pupils. Does this mean that Keir Starmer wants a country where people talk more like me than you?
Definitely not, and that's definitely not well, he won't get away with it while I'm in there anyway, because I ain't changing the way I speak. It's about confidence. That's what it's about. It's about giving people the confidence in their own voice, which is what I've kind of tried to do in being real to myself and the way I speak. I speak like most Mancunians around me. And, you know, I think it's important that people can present themselves in their true form. And I think far too often people feel they have to be a version of something else and are chiselled away at to conform. Whereas actually what we're proposing is that level of confidence to be who you are and teaching confidence. Because in private schools, a lot of the time, people are taught about their confidence, talk about presentation, talk about how to speak.
You know, it's not even, I mean, sometimes it's more like osmosis than an actual explicit lesson. It's just you naturally do debating. You stand up in class.
Exactly. And I've talked about it's almost implied from a working class background from an early age is know your place. No one ever said to me, Angie, know your place, get out, stay in your lane. But it was kind of implied in everything we did. You know, police, doctors, people like that. They were people that did things to you. They weren't the people like you. And again, it's giving people, young people in particular, that confidence to say that just because you can't see yourself in somebody that's in a position of power now does not mean to say that you can't be that person, and actually you can be the best version of yourself and get on in life. You don't have to change who you are.
Have we got much flesh on the bones of how you would actually teach it?
Well, it's about having teachers in the classroom that can build that resilience and understanding that. I think far too often we've been pushed towards a rigorous academic route. You know, we've heard Rishi Sunak talk about, you know, maths and everything else. And that, of course, those skills are important. But the soft skills that employers often speak to me about and other parliamentarians, that ability to have that confidence in yourself, that what are you good at as opposed to what we should, everybody are our widgets and we should come out of school with certain skills, that actually, yes, we should have core skills, but not everyone's good at everything. You know, I found my vocation in life at school, probably wouldn't have said that was what would be my pathway, but you know, finding something that you really enjoy, that you find that you're good at, whether that's creative or academic, and then giving the young person the opportunity and the confidence to take that to the next level, I think is the most important thing we can do in terms of helping children get on and reforming our education system. And part of that, if I can be blunt, is trusting teachers again, qualifying them to do their job and then trusting them to teach in the classroom.
I hadn't heard the word oracy before. Oracy. Oracy.
Yeah. It's a word.
It is, apparently.
It's the word of the day.
It certainly is. You're not going to get many points in Scrabble.
I quite like discombobulated. It's one of my favourite words. It rolls off the tongue.
Same here. Let's take some calls. Sam's in Clapham to kick things off. Sam, what would you like to ask Angela Rayner?
So first off, I want to just give a little bit of background. I actually voted for both you and Keir in the Labour leadership contest. And I actually wanted you to stand as the leader, as it turned out. For my entire life, my vote has never counted. I used to live in Woodford, where Ian Duncan Smith was my MP for years and years, despite the fact that the majority of us, the majority of the whole of my constituency, did not want him to be. And I want you to tell me whether you are actually a Democrat and you will support proportional representation like the Labour Party actually want and the majority of the country want, or if you aren't, defend why that is the case.
Sure, and thank you for that question. And it is a live topic in the Labour Party. It will come to conference, no doubt. We've had trade unions and other parliamentary Labour Party constituencies that have raised this issue around proportional representation. And the last Labour government was also looking at that before under Tony Blair. And yeah, I'm yet to be convinced by it. I understand all the arguments and I understand them quite vigorously, but I'm also concerned because changing the voting system, what happened, for example, in the Northwest with the European Parliament is, despite me being pregnant and actually in labour at the time and left the hospital to go and vote in the European elections, I got Nick Griffin as my representative in the Northwest, and that absolutely appalled me. So, I do think that our voting system, it needs reform. It does need reform, and one of the things I've concentrated on at the moment as Deputy Leader of the Labour Party is getting more people from different backgrounds, and I think class, particularly working class, is a real problem in a lot of our institutions at the moment and people's opportunities to get on. Hence why I'm really backing and supporting what Keir's saying in this mission.
Just let me steer you back to what Sam's asking about, which is essentially, would you back PR? Would you vote for it at conference? Would you be supportive of a proposal for proportional representation?
I've said quite categorically, my personal view on it is I've yet to be convinced, and I've just outlined the reasons why.
Because
and I know that people will shout from each side of that debate, and they feel quite passionate about it. But it will come to conference, and I am a Democrat, and if our party decides that's where it wants to go, then I will be led as part of that, and I will do my leadership in ensuring that democracy prevails in the party. But as part of the debate, I'm not quite there yet. I can understand the arguments, but I'm not quite there yet.
That's a solid answer. Why is Neil Lawson facing expulsion proceedings from the Labour Party?
I don't know the details, I'm honest. The EHRC plan that we had, if you remember, was about interference from the leaders in particular around complaints and around processes around that. So I don't get involved in anything to do with that. I've not seen the case against Neil. It is worrying. I do understand people's concerns when they think that the Labour Party is not a broad church, and I certainly don't want to see that happening to the Labour Party, because quite frankly, if we can't have room for people who are members, then how are we going to bring the voters on? But I don't know the details of that personal case.
Loosely, he is facing expulsion for encouraging people to vote for a candidate other than Labour in a seat where it wasn't actually Labour that were being pushed out. It would have been the Lib Dems. Layla Moran suggested that people vote Green rather than Lib Dem because that offered the best opportunity of getting the incumbent out, presumably a Tory. Yeah. Neil Lawson retweeted that, called it proper grown-up politics, the idea that you would in some seats try and mobilise votes behind the candidate most likely to unseat the Conservative incumbent, and for that he faces, as I understand it, the rescinding of his 30, 40-year-long Labour membership.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of our rules, that if you campaign for another political party against the Labour Party, then that is in our rule book. It's quite clear, and it's black and white in the rule book. So, but people have an opportunity to present their case as part of that, is my understanding. But that is a long-standing rule of the Labour Party.
Do you like the rule, Angela?
Well, I think the rule's there for a purpose.
A lot of people talk to me. In fact, Sam, didn't he, started his conversation by pointing out that he's got...
I understand that, and I understand progressive alliances. I understand what people are saying there. I mean, where I grew up in Stockport, there's areas of Stockport that they know, that they never felt Labour could get in. So the voters themselves are not idiots. They generally, I've met many Labour people who have said, I vote tactically at a general election because that's the way they see it.
For a Labour member to encourage people to do that. Yeah, but we don't
encourage people to do that. The voters have made that decision because they're intelligent enough to understand the landscape in which they live. But the rule in the Labour Party is that if you're a Labour Party member, you don't encourage people to vote for another party against the Labour Party.
Fair enough. Ali is in Barnet. Ali, what would you like to ask Angela Rayner?
Morning. Thanks for taking my call. Just a quick one. I mean, I had so many questions, but basically, first thing is about university tuition fees. I wanted to just know if Labour were to become the next government, what are the current plans for university tuition fees? They're astronomically high right now. Is there anything Labour's going to do to bring them down? As a side question, I wanted to ask about first-time buyers and if there's going to be any additional support for them. But obviously, if you get any time, getting around to that one. But I just wanted to know mainly about the university fees.
Shoehorning it in anyway. Well, let's start with the university fees. Thank you, Ali.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, tuition fees. Look, Keir's been dead clear that the Tories have crashed the economy. We're in a very difficult financial climate to what we were, so we're not going to be able to abolish tuition fees. But there are other things that we're looking at, how we can, for example, when people start repaying the tuition fees, the amount on their loan that they pay. So there's other ways that we could try and help students with their tuition fees at the moment. And we also, as part of our missions today, announcements around further education and tertiary education, vocational, which I think is incredibly important as well. So yes, we do need to help students. Yes, we will have a programme to support students with their tuition fees, but we're not going to be able to get rid of tuition fees immediately because of what we're going to inherit. And we've been honest about that. And in terms of first-time buyers, we said that we would put them front of the queue. Basically, far too often first-time buyers don't get that opportunity. And we need to do something about wages at the moment. We need to do something about the cost of living, because for far too often now, many people who thought that dream of home ownership was just about getting there, they've been saving, living with their parents and doing whatever they can to save up to get their deposit. And because of what's happened now with interest rates and mortgages, people have had that snatched away from them. So we've got to challenge the underlying cause of what's causing people's cost of living crisis at the moment.
I mean, lots of words there, but not much policy, really.
Well, the policy, I said clear. I said we was going to sort out tuition fees by looking around the edges of how we can repayment, the rate of which repayment, the loan percentage amount. And in terms of if we put first-time buyers at the front of the queue, we said that we'd build more homes. We've been very clear.
What does that mean?
That they get first dibs, because at the moment they don't. Often the developers.
How does that work? I don't understand. So you'd have some form of control on who developers can and can't sell to? Who would be pushed to the back of the queue?
Well, instead of developers holding those properties, and for example, in a lot of places we get holiday lets as well, is actually getting first-time buyers and moving the market in that direction. And by building more homes, which we've been very clear about as well that we need to do, and the government has scrapped the planning laws to try and enable that to happen, we will build more homes so that first-time buyers can get on that market. But at the moment, like I say, the biggest problem for first-time buyers is that they can't afford it now. It's just been taken away from them.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you, Angela. Ashley is in Dulwich. Ashley, what would you like to ask Angela Rayner?
Hi, James. Hi, Angela.
Hi.
I'm a pretty reasonable left-leaning Labour voter, and I want to know, Angela, do you think that you guys are relying on my hatred of the Tories at the moment over my concern of Keir's flirtation with the right? And I'm genuinely interested in your answer because I don't feel like you're fully representing me at the moment.
What areas, Ashley, in particular?
Well, this idea of the protests, I'm a pretty liberal guy, and nothing from Labour saying that they're going to reverse Suella Braverman's protest policy. There's a number of things. I can go into a lot that Labour are sitting on the fence to try and buy back the red wall voters. But what about me?
Well, Ashley,
thanks for
that question. And no, we're not taking your vote for granted or your, despising of the Tories, because actually there's quite a lot of people, even people that voted Tory at the moment, that are, shall we say, less than impressed with the Conservatives at the moment. And we're not relying on anyone to then just use that to say, well, we'll vote Labour. I think we've got a very inspirational plan. If you take my Future of Work, which will reform the work sector so that people have got secure jobs, we'd end fire and rehire, we'd give people rights from day one, we'd expand flexible working, we'd promote collective bargaining, we'd support the unions as opposed to being in constant dispute with them, who do raise standards in the workplace. That's one area in particular I think will transform the work in Britain. And then you look at the Great British Energy and you look at the Green Prosperity Plan, which is about getting to net zero, which is what we know we need to do, but by doing it by skilling up people, giving young people skills for the future and a long-term job that is secure. Those two things in itself, I think, will make an incredible difference. The house building programme, so people can get a home for the first time. These things, the investment in our NHS at the moment, which we've seen has been completely run down by the Conservatives in the last 13 years. 10,000 new doctors and nurses places that will have an incredible impact on our NHS and bringing down waiting times. I mean, all of those things in itself, I think, are magnificent. But is it going to be everything to to all people. No, it has to be pragmatic as well. We have to be clear about what we inherit, and we're going to inherit, if we're lucky enough to get elected, a very difficult economic situation. So we can't do everything we want to do immediately, but I can promise you we will change Britain for the better.
What about specifically the public order bill that Ashley referred to?
Yeah, and, public order, look, the right to protest is an absolute key pillarstone of our democracy.
It's been demolished.
Yeah, and like with quite a lot of things, including voter ID and everything else,
the
the ability
position
to...
is not to rescind that bill.
Well, our party position is very clear that the right to protest is absolutely part of our pillarstone of democracy. It's not something that we've been fascinated on like the Conservatives are. We don't believe that there is a huge problem with people protesting, but we are concerned about the way in which the whole culture of this government is about restricting people's civil rights. And I think actually some Conservatives are concerned about that as well.
They are, but again, you're ducking it a bit. The threshold to define disruptive protesting gets to be essentially decided by a politician. Suella Braverman can point at someone over there waving a flag and say that is disruptive, or a police officer. And we've seen many reasons in recent months not to trust police officers as much as we were taught to when we were growing up.
Sure, but that's a whole other issue on how we put that conduct
because
of police back in
my colleague Charlotte Lynch was arrested by police using their own discretion at a protest, and she was there to do journalism. So it would be quite straightforward to say it's ridiculous that this threshold has been lowered so much that it's in the eye of a Home Secretary.
And it's a cultural issue that comes from the top.
So why aren't you going to get rid of it?
And the cultural issue of this government is very draconian and is about taking people's rights away. Well, our culture in the Labour Party government will be somewhat different to that. People should be able to go about their daily business, but also people should also have the right to protest in this country, as they always have.
Why aren't you going to get rid of it?
Because it's not a question of whether we'll get rid of it or not. The culture will change. And also, in terms of our priorities, the first King's Bill will have the stuff on the future of work. It will make sure that, we have rights for people and that we support people in getting through the cost of living crisis. There's a lot of things to do immediately, but the one thing that we won't be doing is acting like Suella Braverman and their government, who have been taking civil rights away and pushing a culture of restricting people and demonising people for exercising our hard-fought rights.
It's like a weapon, Angela, and it's all very well. I think what you're saying is, don't worry, because we won't use that weapon. But the weapon will still be there. And if you do get into power, then a day will dawn when you're no longer in power and someone else will come in.
And we will
you
look
have
at
the power to legislate to remove that weapon.
And we will look at that. But I'm saying that our priority in the next coming Labour government has to be about tackling the cost of living crisis and about giving people proper standards in work and reversing the attacks on our NHS and our public services that we've seen from the Conservatives. And our culture around people's rights and civil liberties is completely different to Suella Braverman.
Immigration officers will be permitted to use force to detain and remove child migrants under a switch in policy by the government. What's Labour's line on that?
Well, I don't think forcing children and using force against children is anything but child abuse. So I don't think that's acceptable.
State-sanctioned child abuse.
Well, it's not nice, is it? You can't be forcing children. I mean, I remember the days when I was younger and people used to say a good bit of discipline for your kids was to give them a good smack. But we've kind of moved on from that, and I think any form of restraining of children in that way, I think it's not what we do. It's not how we do things, and it's not okay to do that to children. It's not.
And the other area in which Ashley would probably suggest the Labour Party or Keir Starmer's leadership seem to be flirting with rather more right-wing policies would be migration in general. Did you work in the care sector earlier in your career?
I did. I was a home care. I worked in a care home for a while, and then I worked in the private sector as a home care worker, and then I worked in a local authority as a home care worker. What
did you make of the suggestion from the sort of outer reaches of the Tory party this week that they should stop issuing visas to people born elsewhere to come here and work in that sector?
I think it's complete nuts. I think they have absolutely no idea haven't got a Scooby-Doo about what actually happens on the front line of our care sector and our NHS and most of our public services. The key workers that we have every single day that are from all different walks of life that keep us going. I met a train driver. He worked on for trains. He wasn't actually a train driver, but he worked. He actually drove a bus. That's right. He's called Terry, I think. He got onto my Twitter afterwards and said, "Thanks for meeting me, Ange." And he said he's got a degree, a teaching degree. He's very well educated and he's driving buses. So I think people from all walks of life, all different places, proper power public services do a tremendous job. And I think idiots that go around saying that we don't need them in our care sector need to get off their ivory tower and get out there and see what's happening on the ground.
Let's go to Dave in Hyde. Is that your patch, Hyde?
Hyde's near me. It's Johnny Reynolds' patch right next to me,
Dave,
near Staley, Vegas.
What would you like to ask Angela Rayner?
Hello, Angela. Yes, near Staley, Vegas. But, what I want to know is why are the Labour Party not committing to nationalisation of the railways, the utilities, transport? I mean, that the railways around here, Trans-Pennine Express, one of the worst rail records in the country. You look at the fiasco of Thames Water in your own constituency. North West Water are pumping sewage into the River Tame, and these people are paying paying their shareholders dividends. And yet we hear nothing from the Labour Party about we're going to how they're going to address it, renationalisation. I mean, even Tory voters want to renationalise the railways. The privatisation of the utilities has been an utter farce and a failure, and yet we hear nothing from the Labour Party about taking them back into national ownership.
Okay, well, I can reassure you that we have said that we'll nationalise the rail and we will continue to say that and we will do it. And we've said as soon as those contracts are up, they will come back into public ownership. And on water, I mean, look, my water was off yesterday in Ashton again. Every other week it's off at the moment, but they have no problems, as you say, in giving us stuff into our waterways that we don't want. But on utilities, we've said we'd take a very pragmatic approach and that we need regulation. We need to enforce those regulations. The government are failing to do that at the moment, hence why we've got that problem with them, and that, we'll look at it in the long-term plan. But we've also said that, look, we haven't got a huge sums of money to go nationalising everything.
Because you have to buy it back.
Because you have to buy it back, yeah. And we see that actually we can regulate them, enforce that regulation and get the same outcome without spending loads of money that we haven't got, that we need to put more into the NHS or we need to put more into frontline services that are on their knees at the moment. So it's a question of we can't do everything all at once. So therefore we had to have a pragmatic approach about how we deliver. Rail we will renationalise. We've kept that commitment because we don't think that the privatisation of the rail system has been good for passengers and has value for money, and so we've said absolutely not. And on the other utilities, we're taking a pragmatic approach. We will regulate, we will enforce regulation, and then we'll see where we're up to. And if we've got finances and resources and that is the right approach to take, then we haven't ruled it out. We just can't afford to do everything, and it's not necessarily the easiest or the best way of delivering better services. Regulation and making sure that people do their job properly is important as well.
Do you want to come back, Dave?
Let's talk about, that money and economics. The Tory party's found the money. We had Theresa May saying, there's no magic money tree. And all of a sudden we get COVID and the Tory government spaff 11 billion on wasted PPE.
Yeah.
The government, the government are currently putting 16 billion subsidies into privatised railway companies. The money's there, Angela. That all this talk
to
about.
be fair, she did point out
the
that
money's there,
nationalising the railways is a Labour
We will
Party
nationalise
policy.
railway, but the money isn't there because if you look at national debt now, if you look at inflation, you look at the economy because of what the government have done, and I absolutely agree with you around the billions of pounds wasted on dodgy contracts, and that really annoys me because that's money that could have been invested in our frontline services and in businesses that actually have intelligence in that area that could have helped us through that situation that we were in. And we're still paying around £750,000 a day on PPE that can't be used to store it. There's huge sums of money that is being wasted as we still speak now because this government have not been able to govern appropriately and have just done it basically on the back of a fag packet, giving contracts to their mates who didn't have any experience whatsoever in the field that they were asked to do these contracts in, and no clawback. So money's not given. £230 million that was wasted on fraud, and £230 billion a year wasted on fraud that they've not got back. I mean, it's just gross incompetence, and that does annoy me because people at home who have got a cost of living crisis at the moment that see our public services on their knees, and we're told that we haven't got pay rises for public service workers, and all the while they're wasting our money and acting in a absolute dodgy fashion, and all they're interested in is who's going to get themselves into the Lords and into cushy positions after they leave government.
Speaking of annoyed, it's my listeners are really picking up on the public order bill. I don't know whether you want to take this away with you. Disappointed in Angela's response to the public order bill, prevarication on her part, worthy of a Tory minister. It's not rocket science. If Labour are happy with people being able to protest, they should rescind it. A terrible response. Labour are making it very difficult for me to vote for them. Why can't they just commit to rolling back this attack on civil liberties? We're not Tories. You can trust us with this power just isn't good enough. Maybe I'm wrong and we are a country of authoritarians and this is what the people really want, says Dave in Bristol. Just for your reference. Next call, Steph in Wimbledon. Steph, what's your question?
Hello, Angela. Hello, James.
Hello, Steph.
My question is very simple. Last week, Tobias Ellwood, a Tory MP, came out and admitted that Brexit is a mistake. I'm not hearing anything from the Labour Party that reflects that same position. Why not?
Because leaving the European Union was a decision that was made some years ago in a referendum and, remain lost. And that's the facts. And we've left the European Union. I think the way in which we've done it is a dog's dinner, if I'm honest. And I think the debate is how we keep closer relationship with Europe and how we move forward. But you can't put the genie back in the bottle. We had a referendum. The country voted to leave the European Union. And this government, the Conservatives, have handled it, I think, disastrously. We were promised oven-ready deals. We were promised lots of money. Jacob Rees-Mogg said our energy bills would go down. That hasn't happened. So I think, people are angry that, what they were promised hasn't been delivered. But we had a referendum and the referendum was to leave. And that's where we are. And we've been very pragmatic in our approach since then in saying that we've left the European Union, but that doesn't mean to say that we can't look at how we can get better trading relationships and better collaboration.
It kind of does mean that. And everything's in their
Well, you
gift
can't have
anyway.
it back in.
No, I agree.
That's the point I'm making. We're out.
It's a generational, if there is going to be any reverse.
We're out. I mean, if we tried to even get back in, you wouldn't be in on the same terms as we were in before.
What is that?
We're out of the European Union.
You won't answer this question to Steph's satisfaction, and everybody understands why. But is there a point at which it becomes politically live again? Because the polling, imagine it hit 80% saying it was all a terrible mistake. You've got Farage admitting it was a failure.
Yeah, okay, let's walk through that. Okay, so everyone says it's a terrible mistake. We shouldn't have done it. You can't go, hi, can I come back in where I was?
No, I know.
That's not
I know
an option.
That. I know
it's
that.
not an option.
But the conversation about
you either try
returning-
and rejoin, and then you rejoin on different terms, which I don't believe people will be happy with, or you try and make good of a situation that the government have completely handled disastrously.
I think, I know we're tight for time. Should I squeeze in? I can't. I would ask you, however, about the story involving Chris Pincher that has broken this morning, which...
it's awful, and he shouldn't still be an MP, and the Conservative Party are a disgrace for allowing it to continue.
And
in summary.
That was actually, people forget, that was the reason why Boris Johnson finally...
Yeah, because they all tried to defend it, and it's not defendable, and they need to do more about it. They need to clean up their act. They don't do things. They throw someone off the whip for a couple of months and then regurgitate them a few months later, hoping that the public have forgotten what happened.
I have got a couple more minutes. Dave's in Woking. Dave, it's your lucky day.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, James. Hi, Angela. My question's about the private rental sector. There are 10 million private renters in England alone, and we are being hammered left, right and centre There's a renters reform bill sat waiting for its second reading that keeps getting delayed. It's been delayed for 4 years now. What's Labour's stance on private renting, social housing? The reason a lot of people are in private renting is because they have no choice.
Absolutely. And I would refer everyone to Prime Minister's questions yesterday, where I concentrated very much on this in terms of that bill, why the government haven't brought it forward, the impact on not building more homes on people who are waiting on lists at the moment to get a home, and that impact that it's having on renters at the moment as well. And I pushed the government really hard on that yesterday. You won't be... You won't be, happy about the response, I don't think, because all I got back was personal insults and jibes. But I did try and ask some very serious questions about home ownership, mortgages, rents, and the problems that renters have at the moment, and that renters reform bill that we were promised that we're not getting at the moment, because I hear that there is rumblings within the Conservative benches, and that's why they've not brought it forward. But of course, that doesn't have any comfort for people who are struggling at the moment, and the government are looking after themselves. And I talked about their self-interest as opposed to the national interest at the moment, which I think is what they're doing, unfortunately.
Who's the more capable opponent at PMQs, Oliver Dowden or Dominic Raab?
They're both. Do you know what? Right, Dominic Raab.
I'm not going to let you leave the studio until
Dominic
you give me an
Raab was
answer
just looked a little bit awkward. Yeah, so I think that was his thing. But Oliver Dowden just looks like a 5-year-old that has done a punchline and gets all giddy but doesn't actually answer a question. I actually think some of his punchlines would be really good if he wrapped them up with an actual answer to a question as well, and I think he'd do better if he did that.
So who's better?
Me. They're not very good at it, are they?
Last question. Chris is in Irving. Chris, what would you like to ask Angela Rayner?
Morning, James. Morning, Angela. Right, I'm
Morning.
a SNP voter, right, and I really don't like the Tories at all. If I was to vote Labour, I'm going to be giving up Scottish independence and trying to get back in the EU. What's an offer for a Scottish person?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's about getting us back to a United Kingdom that respects all of our nations as part of that. We were the party of devolution. That's how we've got the Scottish Parliament. We want to go much further than that. Gordon Brown did a whole commission into that you can look into the work that he's done for us, that the next Labour government will enact. And it's about that respect of working together. And I actually think that's a very Scottish thing, and it's also a very English thing, and part of our union is about working together. But that respect that seems to have been completely disregarded. And in terms of Europe, as I said before on a previous caller's question, is look, we've left the European Union. That ship has sailed. It's about how we can get the best possible deal. And quite frankly, the way the Conservatives have done it has left us pariahs internationally. We look a laughing stock internationally. And we haven't been pragmatic about how we're going to do frictionless trade, how we're going to support our industries, including important vital industries in Scotland. Because quite frankly, the Conservatives are too busy looking after themselves. And, we've had a carousel conveyor belt of ministers that haven't been there for 5 minutes, and that's really damaged our opportunity to get a better deal. But in terms of rejoining the EU, we're not in that territory, unfortunately. But what we can do is respect Scotland as part of the United Kingdom, bring more powers to the Scottish Parliament, which is what we want to do, and continue with devolution, and have a settlement that actually is about industry for the whole of the United Kingdom and supporting people no matter where they live in our countries.
Do you want to come back, Chris?
Yeah, aye, right. What I would love, if you was getting power regardless, just reverse austerity. Make the rich feel the pinch this time for 13 years, because it's no fair for the poorest in society to just get poorer. So that would be amazing.
I agree on austerity, and I've never changed my position on that. When the coalition government started their austerity programme, I was a trade union rep, a Unison rep in the Northwest, and I saw the decimation of our public services. And just a microism of that, every single one of us who were home care workers that were MVQ level 2 and foundation degree trained, that could keep people at home who needed palliative care were made redundant because they cut public services. And guess what? We've now got a crisis in the NHS because we don't have good public services at a community level, and it's costing us more. So it didn't make economic sense to do what the political choice was of that government at the time, and I'm completely opposed to it. And people need that support because it costs less in the end if you support people, give them good secure jobs, give them good public services right from the onset.
Thank you, Chris. We're out of time. I didn't get a single female caller. Why is that?
I don't know.
Oh, we did have Steph on Brexit, didn't we? Yes,
yeah,
quite right.
We are out there.
Yeah, I know. Why do you think that is? Why do you think men are so much keener to come forward? Because this particular programme gets more calls from women than any other phone-in show in history, but just not on this occasion.
I hope they're out there and they're going to keep making their voices heard, because, and especially
So do I.
Especially women from different walks of life and different backgrounds. Be yourself and be loud and proud. That's what I say.
Angela Rayner, many thanks.
Thank you.
It is 10:38 and Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines.
Labour's deputy leader has told James that Chris Pincher should now resign as an MP. The government is facing the prospect of a by-election after the former whip was sanctioned over groping allegations. Angela Rayner has also told LBC she is yet to be convinced by a change to the voting system. Some senior figures within the Labour Party have called